So this year is Lila Nishmas Rav Moshe Manis Ben Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak Shiur Aleinu. So today, yes, the page Chav Dalet on the bottom. So we're talking about this idea that even though that when children are too young, or even a person who starts to get involved in certain type of avodah, he doesn't feel necessarily a hisragshus, he doesn't feel any kind of feeling for it, but we want to encourage him to feel things that are related to kedusha. So we're about to give this example. He says, "V'hanar hamisragish b'leil Pesach minikyon hacheder." We're about 2, 4, 6, 7 lines from the bottom. A kid walks into the Seder night. They know something's going on. There's something exciting about Seder night, that the room looks different, it's clean, there's something special about it, there's white on the table. Min Rube Hanera is a lot of candles, Min Al Shulchan HaMasuda Yafer, right? The table is more organized than any other time of the year. Gam Kein Toivu, that's also good. Ki Gufay Misragish Mizeh, because his body becomes Misragish from there, Nafshe Pnima V'Vatz Betzes, U'Misragetch Shez Bamirs HaGoda, and his soul, his inner soul, starts to sprout and starts to feel from the saying of the Haggadah, L'amra ma'at b'slavos l'Hashem, with a little bit of inspiration for Hashem, Av she'en yedei mazeh v'al mazeh v'zeh, even if he doesn't really understand exactly what's going on. Ha'alpi darka shana roitzim b'kuntres hazeh, l'hargil es b'nei hanar b'dar chasidus. The alpi darka that we started with this kuntres to habituate, to accustom the young generation, dar chasidus, nechutze hilahem, it's a necessity for them. V'yev shelahem acheres, it's not possible to do it anyway. Because as we explained before, they prematurely start to feel and develop, and therefore we need to introduce this to them. Even if we're not going to bind the essence of their souls. It's not going to be a true hislavus, a true enthusiasm. Rakufani is just a physical one. That's also good. Since it's things of holiness that they're feeling from. He gets connected, even though it's on a superficial level, even though it's not the ultimate level of we want him to be inspired by the fact that he's connecting to Hashem and all these other things, but even though it's on a superficial level, at least he's connecting to the right things. Then when he gets older, it'll be easier for him to become a true chassid. He gives an example. He says, if you tell me that I'm wrong, when a kid starts to learn Gemara and Tosfos in 7th grade, is he really getting it? He's not getting it, but we're exposing him to good things. We're trying to make it a little bit interesting to him. We're trying to get him that he's excited about Gemara. But nobody believes, at least for most kids, that in 7th or 8th grade, that when they're learning Gemara, they're really understanding what's going on, right? They're learning how to get accustomed to it. We try to show them some of the more interesting Gemaras, some of the ones that they can relate to, so that they connect to it, so that when they get older, they already have positive feelings towards it. Nobody thinks that they understand it the way that an adult understands it. It's still good. It becomes connected to Torah. That's why there's a lot of things that you have in Yiddishkeit like this. For example, we make a big deal about playing dreidel on Hanukkah with the kids. Right? If you talk to somebody who knows Kabbalah, they'll tell you all the deep things about a dreidel, how the Rebbes would play dreidel. But to the kids, it's a game. But it's a game that's connected to Yiddishkeit. Or let's say, how do we convince the kids to go to shul? Every shul in America, probably in the world, has a candy man, right? Where this minig come from? The minig comes from the idea is we want the kids. They're not coming to shul for the right reason, but we want them to have positive memories, excited to go to shul, even if it's because they wanted to get a lollipop. But the idea is that they come to shul. Then when they get older, they remember shul as a positive place, a place where they had positive experiences instead of negativity. Unfortunately, a lot of these things have gotten lost amongst other things that didn't work that way, and we'll see that in a minute. He's going to explain. Right, by the Seder we do it a lot. By the Seder you see it a lot. But the truth is, in almost every yontif we have certain things for the kids. There's always an element of trying to get the kids involved in yontif, to try to, right, the kids are involved with the decorations on Sukkos. We have the candy bags on Simchas Torah. And these are things that they're not necessarily halachas, but that in all parts of Yiddishkeit, these are things that are kept, right? I imagine every shul I've ever been to gives out candy bags on Simchas Torah. Why? Because you can't expect the kid to dance around the bima and be happy with that alone. You need to give him something else to be excited about. But the reason why it's good, even though maybe in previous generations it wasn't needed, but the reason why it's good is because at least you're connecting him to things of kedusha. You're creating an environment where he wants to be connected to things of kedusha. So he says, he says, don't think that I'm coming here to give you all the particulars, that this is a how-to book. I'm not giving you a how-to book. I'm only coming to point out there's a certain deterioration that exists today. I want to point that out. And we need to pay more attention to it. We have to take more care with it than previous generations had to. The way that the fathers and the teachers will map out, even though these kids have this poisonous quality, right? We all agree. The Rebbe said from the first minute he started talking about this that it would be better if they didn't have this issue. But once they have it, so we have to make it work. We have to work with it. He's reminding us it's this early ego of the children. The Rebbe is saying, I'm just trying to map out a path. But you want to know particulars in chinuch? The Torah is full of particulars in chinuch. There's plenty to look at. All I'm trying to do is map out a new concept based on what we have to deal with in our generation. But as far as all the old rules of chinuch still apply, go through the Torah and you'll find them. I'm not introducing anything new. Our Torah is everlasting, is eternal. And forever it tells us how to it instructs us how to elevate ourselves to Hashem. If you the sources are in Torah tell you what to do in every single situation. I'm just pointing out that we need to have a little bit of a different approach, but the rules, the principles still apply. Lamashal. He says, for example, you're going to tell me, what do you mean? You just told me that now a generation, I have to be more entertaining to the kids. So you want to tell me this is a novel idea, right? We didn't have to do this hundreds of years ago. He says, it might be different in its approach today, but this existed where? The Gemara tells us, the Gemara is, the Rabbah, Mekamei de Pasach lehu l'Rabbanon, before he would start to give a shiur, Amar Milsav d'Bichusu Badcha Rabbanon. He would say a joke, and they would laugh. He would open with a joke. This is Rabbah. Rabbah, one of the Amoraim, would open with a joke. L'Soif Yosef Be'emesa u'Pasach Mishmaitza. And then they would sit in awe, and he would start to give the shiur. Ad kan Lashon HaGemara. Right? Now, it's funny, though, when you think about it, because like if you told this to a lot of Rebbeim today, they would tell you it's beneath their covet to start with a joke, to be gelechted, like... But the truth is, you see, Rabbah had no problem with it. Rabbah felt that you needed to lighten the mood a little bit. You needed to let the kids know that they could relate to you. They probably weren't even kids, right? So it's funny. I was thinking about it when I was reviewing this again, and I remember two Rebbeim that did something like this well. The rest of the Rebbeim, I don't really remember if they. I had my 6th grade Rebbe used to sing with us before we started learning. Before we opened the Gemara, he used to start singing a song. I don't know why. I don't remember what songs they were, but I remember they used to start singing. And I remember my 9th grade Rebbe, you remember him also, Rabbi Rutkin, he used to make us, at the end, before we went down to lunch, he would close the Gemara for 10 minutes and he would say, gentlemen, he had a very raspy voice, gentlemen, any question you want to ask me about anything. And he created a rapport. Now, the Rebbe is going to say that doesn't mean that the Rebbe or the father is supposed to come down completely to the child's level. Not every joke that might be appropriate to your friend is appropriate for your 8-year-old son, right? We understand. We're not even talking about off color or whatever. We're talking about certain things, let's say, are appropriate, but at the same time, the Rebbe has to make, or the father has to make sure that the kid knows he's approachable, that they have some kind of relationship, to sort of let him know that it's not all scary, that there's not somebody that he only, and he'll talk about it. There's a difference between two types of fear at the end of this paragraph. He said the joke. Why? Because he wanted to put them in a happy mood. The Shekhinah doesn't rest except if there's simcha. Like the Gemara says, the Torah is like a hammer that shatters a rock and creates many, many different sparks and different ways. So therefore, in other words, what Rabbah's jokes may look very different than what a Rebbe's joke in 2014 has to look like. But the point is that you see that it's in there. It's in that Gemara. Everything's contained in there. If you hit the Torah enough, you'll find exactly relevant for today. For our generation, the Gemara hints, in order to cure this wound of distance, that is made between, we explained before that the child and the Rebbe are on different planets. In order to cure that, he has to work to try to acquire the heart of this child and to bring him closer to him. Simcha is one of the ways. Not only is it one of the ways, says the Rebbe, Nefesh hayelad v'anar, today's children, they cannot deal with sadness. They can't tolerate sadness. He can't listen to somebody who seems like he's an overlord, that he's somebody who's contentious and that he gets angry very easily. Children can't deal with that. By the way, he's saying here that the children can't deal with it. Apparently, though, even in the Rebbe's time, there were people, and there still are, there are adults who live for sadness, right? There are some people who can't wait to tell you about the latest tragedy. They can't wait to tell you like some terrible news. That may work. So with those adults, it may work without that. But with children, he says, children only react to happiness. They can't react to sadness or depression or to anger. They don't react well to that. They just shut down when they encounter that. They shut down. Not that he should make himself into a joke. The Rebbe, not that he needs to reduce his covet. They have to still have a covet for him. Not that he should humiliate himself. God forbid. There should be a fear of a Rebbe, like an elevated person. And he's going to explain this a little bit more now. There's two types of people that one can fear. There's one that you can fear because he may smack you if you don't do what he says, so you're afraid of him hurting you. There's another that you fear because there's such an awe that he's such an exalted person that there's just a fear of disappointing him. Right? Like for example, if you ever go into a Rebbe, there's a certain sense of fear there. Why? What could he do to you? Right, you go in. Let's say you go to Eretz Yisrael. You go into Reb Chaim Kanievsky. He's not going to punch you. He's not going to shoot you. What's he going to do to you? Right? He's not going. And yet you walk in there and you're trembling a little bit. You walk into any tzaddik. Anytime you go into a Rebbe, there's a certain amount of awe. It's not a fear that he's going to do anything to you. Right? You go into Reb David Abu Chatzera, you're sitting there like you feel, you're every muscle in your body's tight. Why? Reb David, he's the sweetest, gentlest person in the world. He's never, no matter what you would do, he would never get angry, right? Because you realize that you're in the presence of something greater than you. There's something here. I don't know what it is, but there's something. And that's really what Yirah Shamayim is supposed to be, not fear. Not the way that we had Rebbeim as kids who would tell us, if you speak Lashon Hara, they pour hot lead down your throat. That's not real Yirah Shamayim. Yirah Shamayim is supposed to be. When you think about how great Hashem is, how could I possibly do an Aveira in front of that greatness? And we'll see that in the Rebbe's Sefer, all about the positive elements of it, as opposed to some of the negativity. We'll see. We'll get to it today. I think even when the Rebbe is telling a joke, the child is trembling, but it's it's intertwined. The Yira and the Simcha is all part of one. He's an amazing person. He's a person that I'm in awe of, and yet, he relates to me. He tells me a joke. He gets me. The Gilu Barada, that's the level that we try to do. We try to, with joy and Ra'ada, we try to tremble with joy. Yirad mimenu like lifnei rags, and not in front of an angry person. If you have a person who's angry and throwing dishes, you'll be afraid of him also. But it's a very different type of fear. Kaisen of al egroif, right? Somebody who has a temper and is somebody who gets easily upset. Rak yiras hakoved. It's a fear of somebody that's honored. Klifnei ish b'bnei aliyah, like when you see somebody who's so much bigger. If the students see the Rebbe as somebody who's like a malach, he'll see him as if he's the embodiment of a malach, or a very elevated person. When the Rebbe gets upset at him, at that point the Talmud won't hate him for it. When he rebukes him, he'll realize that he's doing him a favor, and when he makes a joke, he'll enjoy it, right? He said, so and you think about this, there were some Rebbeim that were good at that. There were some Rebbeim that when we met them, we respected them. There were many that wasn't the case. Many of them were afraid. They used tyranny to keep the kids in line. Those we don't really remember too fondly. Those are not the ones we remember fondly. Even though the other ones we might have been just as afraid of, right? But we don't have that kind of fear. He says, He says, the Shloh says this so beautifully, the Zayda. So, B'dakenu b'nyanu chinuch d'reinu, that he says when it comes to be mechanech our generation, but Amr al Pasuk, it says in the Pasuk, Al teichach leitz pen yisnecha, don't give teichacha, don't rebuke or reprimand a late, somebody's a joker, right, a mocker, because maybe he'll hate you. But if you give rebuke to a chacham, he will love you. Right? With the pasuk shot of the pasuk is a guy who's just making jokes about everything. Don't waste your time giving him rebuke, because he's not going to listen anyway. He's going to hate you for it. A chacham, somebody who's looking to better himself, that's one who you should give haichacha to. Listen to how the Shloh HaKadosh reads this pasuk completely differently. When you come to give a reprimand, you want to give musar to somebody else. Don't embarrass him and don't insult him telling him you're a late. Because with that he'll hate you, he won't listen to you. But you should give him musar as if he's a chacham. How? Emerla, you say, halay chachamata. You're such a smart kid. How could you do something like that? You're better than that. You're so much better. This is the Shloh HaKadosh, maybe one of the first, well before modern psychology came up with positive reinforcement. So you see what he's saying? The pasuk is talking about the same kid. I can either treat him like he's a late, like, you're good for nothing, you'll mount anything, you're a disappointment. That kid will grow up hating the person who's giving the abuse, but the abuse, that was a Freudian slip. So, but the one who says to the kid, you're such a holy neshama, you're so good, you could do so much more, that kid's not going to hate him, he's going to love him. You're building him up. Why would you do this? Then that kid will love you and listen to you. That's the Shloh HaKadosh. How careful do we have to be in our generation? When the heart of the child is so far from us, it's imperative that we rebuke them like chachamim to show, which goes in line with what the Rebbe said originally, that we tell the child, you're the one who's in charge of your own chinuch. It's not me. I can't be mechanech you. I can help you. I can help guide you, but you're the one who's ultimately in charge of your neshama's chinuch. Gam le'etzem hachinuch yorel harbe. Then even for the etzem chinuch it'll help. Lefatech es koichei HaTalmud, to open up his potential shel haguf ha'mayach lotzeis m'mistarim, to come out of their concealment. To strengthen and to arm him for internal avodah. And when I heard a couple of years ago this Shiur from Rabbi Weinberger on this, he likes to point out very often in the Sefer that this is not just being mechanech children. This is also for ourselves. He says people have a tendency to beat themselves up. Right? A person does an aver, he has an afila. Let's say it's even something that he's tried so hard to avoid, and then suddenly it happens, he has an afila. So our tendency is to say, you're an idiot, you're no good, what kind of person are you, how could you do some things like that? He says that the Shloh's advice is for ourselves also. That's not the way to approach ourselves either, not by insulting ourselves, but to say, you can do better, you're going to try harder, you're going to be better next time. That even when it comes to a person giving himself musar, a person has to encourage himself. You can't always be beating yourself over the head. He goes on to say, we could do a couple more lines. He says, before we say this one, and then you'll see this paragraph, there's a great story with the Balatanya. There was I don't know exactly who else it was with, but I heard this story also from my Weinberger years ago, but I don't remember. But I remember that the main character was the Balatanya. There was a chasana for a Yosem and Yisayim, and they needed like 10,000 rubles to set everything up, and they were both Nebuch both. It was before AHH, a precursor to AHH, and they needed to have. We'll give a little plug for they needed to raise 10,000 rubles, and in this town, the Balatani was there, and there were two other tzaddikim. I don't know if it was the Rebbe Melech or if it was the Rebbe Zusha. I don't know, there were two other tzaddikim from that generation there also. And there was a certain they couldn't. They were done. They raised all the money they could raise. They raised like 500 rubles. They were a fortune away. So they said, the Baal Tanya said he was new to it wasn't his town. He was there for whatever, and he said, is there nobody here who has money that could give us the sum? So they said there's one miser who lives on the outside of town in a huge mansion. He's Jewish. He's from, but he doesn't give. He doesn't give. We've tried for everything. He doesn't give. It's a waste. So the Baal Tanya said, let's go see him. Let's go see him, but on one condition. You have to follow my lead. Whatever I say to him, you have to back me up. So they said, okay. They said, but you're wasting your time. He goes, what else? We have no other choice. There's no other way to get the money, so we're going to go try it. So they go to this guy, and the Baal Tanya gives him the whole pitch. He gives him a 10-minute story about how they lost their parents when they were young, and they don't have anybody, and we need this kind of money. He gives, and we imagine he was a pretty good salesman. And the guy is a little bit, it gets to him a little bit. He goes into the other room, he makes a big show, and he comes out and he gives $1. Comes out with like a single. And so the other two Rebbes are looking already like, we told you, like, and the Baal Tanya turns to him and says, wow. I could see your Jewish heart that you gave. You felt this cause. You wanted to help out. You're giving tzedakah b'leiv shalom. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And Shemayim, they're dancing for you. And they turn to walk out. As they're walking out of the door, the guy comes running with like $5. Again, the Baal Tanya turns to him and says, unbelievable. It's amazing. Such a tzaddik you are, the way you give tzedakah, and I didn't even ask you for any more, and you still gave more. By the time they got to like the front gate of the mansion, they had the whole 9,500 rubles. They had everything they needed. So the two Gedolim, they said to him afterwards, how'd you know this was going to work? You knew this was going to work. He said, you know how I knew? He said, because once you break open a Jewish heart, then it comes pouring out. I just had to figure out a way to get him to start giving. Once he was going to start giving, he was going to give. So that's exactly this paragraph that the Rebbe says. He says, "Mashal shemisha mishabchnois b'fanav shenadvenhu." If you have a mashal of somebody who you compliment him that he's a very generous person. It could have been that before that he was very cheap and he didn't give, but now that you've praised him with that, it sort of opens it up. You gave him chizuk, and he's able to overcome his being cheap, his not being willing to give. That you praised him as being a generous donor, you sort of seduced that potential to overcome his midah of being cheap. Therefore, every father and Rebbe, his job is to find those good points, even if they're very, very hidden in potential. They may be very, very buried, but to find those little points and to praise them for it. And to give them chizuk and say, right? You are so prepared to, and you have so many capabilities, you have so many kishroinis to be a gadol b'Torah and avoda. This is your goal. If you only work, you'll reach them. I see the potential in you, right? That's what every parent or Rebbe knows. You got to tell the kids they have potential. But he says one word of caution, one cautionary note. You have to do this b'seichel v'das. You don't want the kid to feel like he already accomplished. In other words, it's supposed to motivate him to accomplish, not that he sits back and says, "Oh, my Rebbe already told me I'm a genius. My Rebbe already told me that I'm better than everybody else. I don't need to work anymore," right? And then he becomes neglectful. So it has to be done with seichel. But the main tool is to complement the potential and to bring it out into the pile, into bringing that out. Okay, so we'll stop here and we'll finish it next week. We won't have shiur because it's Tisha B'Av, unless when Mitzvah Hashem will be in Yerushalayim. Maybe then we could learn. But maybe with the Rebbe will be mechabed us with finishing the Hakdama with.